guys, and welcome back to another video. So if you didn't know, I'm Chelsea. I am currently a final year, a third year at the University of York studying law. And with the recent, pandemic, the lockdown that's happened in the UK, I'm aware that a lot of people's law exams are now going online. So obviously that's like a new thing for a lot of people. And I know that a lot of you are probably worried about how you might answer an online exam type thing or an open exam, or how might you go about it. So I thought I'd make a video offering some advice and explaining how I research, prepare, and then write an exam for a problem question as well as essay questions in exams. So I hope you find this video helpful. So the first thing to explain before I kind of kick in this video, because it kind of is the theme for the whole video and it kind of is the context for the video, is how York teach law and how then we are assessed in law. So we use problem-based learning, which is PBL. God, I feel like I'm giving a sales pitch because I feel like every sales pitch for York starts off with, so we do PBL, but we do. So the way PBL works is it's a process that you do with your law firm, which is like your seminar group. And each week we get given a problem, which is like a legal scenario. And then we work through a set of stages to then find a set of like questions, like our learning outcomes. We then independently research those over the week and then come back at the next week and then say like what we got. So that's kind of like the process of how it works, and our exams are very similar to that. So all of our exams we get 48 hours in advance. So we get the paper, which looks a little something like this. This was my law paper from last year. Like, they're just like normal scenarios that your lecturer has basically written up for you. They'll contain 2 areas of law. This one that I'm going to show you for this video contains EU and public law. And basically the way it works is we get that paper 48 hours in advance. We don't get the questions, but obviously we get the scenario. So from the scenario we can devise what the questions are going to be. And then revise and repair and things like we're doing our independent research for like our normal PBL. And then rather than going back in to a seminar and saying what we got to the tutor and the rest of our firm, we would go into the exam hall and write our answers down. So for those of us at York, it's pretty much normal PBL, business as usual, when we have exams. So it's, in my opinion, I don't think it's much of a big deal. But for those of you at normal traditional universities, I think that the way that we learn law and the way that we learn to apply law might really help you in exams. So that's what I want to share today. So with all the PBL background context out of the way, I want to sort of give a few tips for things you should do before exam season starts. So I understand that a lot of you are going to be at home and you're not going to have the resources in the library, but it's still important to try and find like textbooks, or maybe like order a concentrate book if that's like what you find helpful, or if you have access to Law Trove through your university, or even just like any book, any online textbook you can find, have it saved and ready to go for the topic that your exam is going to be on. Because trust me, when the exam comes around, the last thing you want is to be like, what textbook am I going to find? Like, it's just extra stress. And especially like normally when the libraries are open, the last thing you want is to go to the library and a book not to be there. So once you have all your resources and things bookmarked and you're like ready to go, the first thing you want to do, and this I normally do a week before the exam. So for example, this whole video is going to be about public law. For those of you that have a public law exam, you're welcome, I guess, because I'm assuming the content's the same at every uni. Basically, so for public law, what I would do in those 10 days before the exam started, and at this point, bear in mind, you don't have any idea of what topics within public law your exam's going to be on. So what I would do is I would get a textbook and I would then look at all the law that I've been taught within public law that year, and I would write down like the headings within the textbook, or bookmark the pages in the textbook that are relevant. Basically, you want to look at all the law that you've been taught and then find it in the textbook and then find it in your notes and like have it all sorted. So you know what you've learned and you know how to find more information on it. So for us, we learnt about tribunal, judicial review and the ombudsman. So then I would look at those chapters in a textbook, which I think was about 6-7 chapters in a textbook, and have them ready to go. And then what I would do is I would go through that like textbook chapters and read it all and consolidate the notes into these. These are basically the decoration for my bedroom in exam seasons. Exhibit A, a photo here. Yeah, it was horrendous, exam period. And basically I would write up all of the key information for certain topics and break it down per topic. Now, I have a separate video on how to make all of these, which is on my channel, which I will link in the bio. But basically, for example, I would have judicial review overview. So I have the title here. The key information mainly is in black with separated with blue subheadings, and cases or authors would be in green. So I'd have like a color-coded system that would work for all the notes. And basically, it would be a summary of what that law is, and then I would do it for the whole content that I've learned that year. And then what I would do is I'd put these on my bedroom wall and look at them for like the week before the exam. There's a reason for it, we'll come to it. Those are a really, really good way of making sure you've got all the law, you've refreshed yourself with the law. If you want to watch lectures back and things like that, you can do that alongside that process. It's basically a way to consolidate all of your notes and refresh all of the knowledge. So once you've got all of your notes, they're all on the wall, you're ready to go. The next step comes on the day that you get your exam paper or scenario. So at this point, obviously, you've consolidated all the law, it's all on your bedroom walls or wherever you want it, and you're very confident with the areas of law that could come up. Now, what you want to do is you want to PBL your exam scenario. This exam scenario was about a European citizen who had moved to York and wanted to stay there. He had a daughter who was born in the UK, and then basically he was like out of work and wanted to claim benefits, I think it was, and whether he could, and then the council said that he couldn't because he's not like a worker under EU law, so therefore he doesn't have a right to reside and he's going to be back to the EU. And then he basically was like, I want to challenge this, and that's where the public law comes in with the EU aspect. So that's kind of the scenario in terms of facts. If you want to read it, screenshot now. So this is arguably the most important process now. So you have your scenario, you've got your 24 or 48 hours before you need to hand back your answers to the exam. This also works, by the way, for future people who aren't in lockdown for normal written exams. Yeah, so you need to PBL it. So step one for PBL is you would read through the process and then you would pick out any unclear terms, just anything that you might not understand or something you might not have a full knowledge of, or and if you can't explain a certain concept or a topic, then it's an unclear term. Then once you've done that, you will look through and pick out the key parties. So in this case, it's the guy who's, you know, the European citizen, it's his daughter, it's the council. And then what you do is you think about what their interests are. So what do these people want to get? So in this, you know, for example, the guy who's the European citizen wants to stay in the UK, and his daughter obviously is a UK citizen, she wants to stay here too. The council don't want to have to give him a benefit. So you can kind of like whittle out what their interests are and what they will want to look at the issues within the scenario. Then we do key facts, which is basically a quick summary and chronology of the facts. Ideally, you want to fit them anything between 5 to 10 bullet points, especially if it's something like an A4 page and a bit, like 5-6 sentences should be ample to summarize it all. And that's mainly just to keep referring back to for when you're looking at the law of what the key issues are, you want the key facts rather than having to read back through the whole thing. And then we do a summary, which is mainly, you know, for the weekly PBLs that we do, so we know which ones are which, but if you have multiple exams, that can also be helpful. So basically you summarize the whole scenario and the issues that are present within a sentence or two. Then we name it. I mean, that's a bit redundant for exams because it doesn't really matter, but within normal PBL at York, that's like the highlight of the process because we give it a really fun name. And then what we do is a mind map. So you do it on a piece of paper, you can do it on a whiteboard, however you want, if you want to do a list, whatever you want to do really. And you will kind of think about the key issues, what area of law they might be under. It's basically a blur. It's like any information you know that could link to the scenario, you write it on the board. And then once you've got all of your information there that you think, do you know what, like this is everything I could possibly have pulled out of the scenario, then you highlight them to do like themes. So this one theme would be challenging the decision, one theme would be him getting benefits, one theme would be his right to reside, to stay in the UK, one theme would be his daughter who's a UK citizen and he's like a European citizen. So that's kind of how it would like map out. Then once you have that, then you do the most important stage, arguably, which is the learning outcomes. Now, the learning outcomes are basically the set of questions that you want to then go away, look at the law and see how then you would answer those questions in order to answer and the scenario, right? For this, your questions could be, well, what is a right to reside? How do you challenge a council decision? Can you claim benefits if you are an EU worker, or things like that. So you kind of get the gist of, you pick within your themes on the mind map and come up with a question, so that if you answer the question, you'll be able to advise the person in the scenario. So that's kind of the PBL process, right? So from that then, you'll be able to write up a structure for your exam. So here's mine from last year, which is rough to say the least. So I've got the issues at the top. If you can read my writing, you know, congrats to you, because I really don't think I can read my writing here. So like the issues that I hit present, and then what's that? The approach of how I'm going to answer it. So what I put here, issue 1, is he applied for benefits, he's been refused on local authority discretion, like potential bias. 2 is that he was promised benefits, received them, and then they were taken away without warning. Like legitimate expectation, okay, which are grounds within public law. So then once you've written down your issues within the scenario, I then write an approach of like how I think I'm going to tackle it. So on here I've written that I'm going to do tribunal first, then ombudsman, then judicial review. And then from that, I then write an essay kind of structure, or like a plan to how I'm going to tackle the problem question. So for this, for example, with tribunal, I've written, what is it, the process, the benefits of going through with it, and then the outcome, which then relates it to the scenario. So essentially you want to explain what the law is, how the law works, why you would want to pursue that law within the context of the scenario, like what's the purpose for doing that, what are the benefits, and then it links on to the outcomes of, well, if you were to go through with it, what's the likelihood that you would have a success rate, or are there drawbacks within like costs and times and things like that that you want to factor into whether this is like a worthwhile avenue to pursue. And then, you know, on balance you can say like whether you think they should or should not go down that road. Then within this, obviously, I'm talking about tribunal, ombudsman, and judicial review. So once I've listed all 3 options, I might say at the end, oh, you know, judicial review is really expensive and it takes forever, you know, whereas, you know, tribunal's a bit cheaper, so they might want to pursue that, and you come up with some form of conclusion. So that's kind of how I structure my answers for the law. So that's how I kind of tackle the scenarios and structure my answers for a problem question. And now for how I like do the research and know the law and kind of get the law to apply, basically. What I then do is I go back to my notes that are on the wall. I told you these would come in handy eventually. So all of my notes, you know, whether you've got yours on a laptop, I said, or whether you've got them on the wall, or however you want it, go find your notes. Then you want to go through and pick out which areas of law are going to be relevant, are going to be useful for the scenario. So within this scenario, as I wrote down stuff about potential bias, legitimate expectation, and then general how tribunals, ombudsman, and judicial review works. So what I would do is I'd go find the notes on my wall and I would see what law applies to the scenario. Then I would transfer it to some written notes. These are all typed up on the computer, which I think also just helps you memorize it. But obviously if you have like an open exam, it doesn't really matter about memorizing it. But it equally helps if you have them written up as a starting point for how you're going to type your essay. So then what I would do here is I'd write down basically like what a tribunal is, how they came to be, a bit of background, what the purpose of them are, the legislation that then governs tribunals, the certain sections, the benefits of going through with it, and then procedure of how they actually work, objectives of like in an ideal world what you want to get from it. Again, then the rules and the act that governs that, the different approaches you can take in a hearing, and then the likely outcomes. And this is kind of how it looks when it's all written up. I mean, again, these are all colour-coded, which is purely for memorisation purposes, which you probably won't have to do if it's an open exam. So yeah, so then I have these notes, which everything in these notes is directly applicable to the exam scenario. So basically, here's your cheat sheet for all of the law that's going to then come up. Then what I would do is I'd take these and go back to my PBL and look at the issues, look at the key facts, and look at my learning outcomes and marry them together. I then would then tweak my structure and think, okay, these are the areas of the law that I want to talk about. This is how then I'm going to structure that answer. and then you can just write it up. And then obviously once you've written it up, you can go back, reread it, tweak, add any extra bits of law in, add any extra like citations and etc. in. Another thing to note as well, open exams, if they're anything like York, you do need to do full citations like it's a normal essay, whereas obviously in exams normally it would just be like the name of the case and a year and maybe the court if you're lucky, whereas in open exams it has to be full citations, full referencing for everything. So that's something to note. Also, another thing to note is you need to be really precise and concise. An easy way to do this is if you're mentioning statute, specifically go to the section, the subsection that you're talking about, and then link that to the facts and the scenario. So within this, for example, if you want to be really fact specific, rather than saying, oh, he's not a UK citizen, you would say, he's an EU citizen from X country, which then gives them da-da-da rights. Like, basically find the specific bits within that scenario that is most applicable to the law. So that's how I write problem questions for the exams. If you want any other advice or questions on that, put them in the comments below. And now for how I write essays in exams. So our essays are a bit different in that the essay topic within an exam will link to the scenario. So obviously we get our papers in advance. It will then enable us to know roughly what the essay question is going to be. But if you have an open exam, then you'll obviously get the essay question in advance anyway. I have full videos on how to break down essay questions, how to tackle them, how to research, how to go about it like a normal essay. They're on my channel, so feel free to watch those if you want advice on that. This video I'm solely going to focus on within the exam like time period, how I would then go from reading the question to formulating an answer. But I'm also going to do a video in a few weeks about how I break down, understand, and then research essay questions, because I think that's a really like hard thing to kind of like do at university. Sometimes you get these questions and you're like... So that video will come out soon, look out for that. So for essays, once you've got your question, obviously from your question you can deduce what areas of law it's on, what it's asking you, what areas you're going to have to look into, and how you're then going to have to structure the essay. There's actually a really good website, I'll put it in the bio, that lists all of like the words that you have at the start of essays, whether it's like explain, critically evaluate, analyse, discuss, all of those and what they actually mean and what lecturers want from it. So I will put that in the bio because I think that's a really easy way to like get started. So then once I have that and I know like what the question's asking me, I will then go back to my wall notes. I again will look at all the law that is relevant to that exam, and then I whittle it down. Obviously my notes here are from when I didn't know what the question could be, so I wrote multiple, but it kind of still applies in that basically what I do is I blurt down any information I already currently have on like big wall notes, any information that I know, any arguments that I'm thinking of how I would like structure it, and then I like write them down like in a bullet pointer sort of list. This is an example of one. Pause if you want to read it. And then I like write all my references and stuff so I can go back to it, and that's just like acts as my starting point. You can do a mind map, you can do a proper blurt if you want, and basically put all of your information down in one place, which acts as your starting point for the essay. Then basically I just write the essay like I'm writing a normal essay. So I will look at the sources I've currently looked at, maybe go back and find them, reread them if I think they're extra like relevant to the scenario, find other sources using websites like Google Scholar, your library index, any sites that have been recommended to you by your faculty, write up all of my research and then look at arguments and how I can word it, write down an essay structure and then write the essay. Normally if your essay question is linked to the problem question, once you've done your problem question research, you pretty much should know all that you need to know to then write the essay. So it's like two birds, one stone, but it ultimately depends on how your department structure exams and how they write their exam papers. And essentially that is how I tackle and write my essay normative questions in an exam. So basically what I've found, which I think is incredibly helpful, and I know that a lot of unis don't do this, and even my uni, to be honest, doesn't do this for every single exam, and they should. Can I just put that out there? Which is basically the essay question that I answered and then all of the information that the lecturer wanted to see. So then, like, for me, this was really helpful after the event because I could look at what I'd written, cross-reference it with what he wanted, and know like why I got the grade that I got. I'll put this on the screen now so you guys can like look at this and read it in your own time. I think that's just really helpful because obviously I've shown you the scenario, which was like our paper. This has the essay question on it that I actually answered, and then all the information he was looking for. So it kind of gives you an idea, at York at least, what they expect from us, which might, you know, translate to your university. But yeah, that's basically it on how I tackle exams. This video has probably been pretty long. I hope it was helpful. As always, any questions that you have about exams generally, or about, you know, PBL process, or want any tips, then you can put them in the comments below. As I said, I will link videos that I've done previously about revision, about how I write and prepare for exams, and also how I approach essays. I'll put all of that in the description so you can watch those videos if you want help on that specific thing. So as always, stay inside, stay safe. Good luck to those of you that are doing exams. I know A-levels have been cancelled, but for those at university, still powering on online, doing all those online classes and now online exams, good luck. I'm sure you'll absolutely smash it. And I will see you guys in the next video. I'll see you next week. Bye, guys.